It wasn't a scandal that came from a leaked email or a rogue paparazzi photo. It wasn't an expose dropped by a tabloid or a royal insider whispering to the press. No, this time it was a joke. Just a few words delivered with a smirk on a late-night comedy show. But those words hit harder than any headline Meghan Markle had ever faced. Because when Jon Stewart leaned in and cracked that now infamous punchline, the internet didn't just laugh, it detonated. At first, the line seemed like just another jab in the never-ending media circus around the Duchess of Sussex. But this time felt different. It wasn't outrage that followed, it was mockery. It was meme after meme, video edits racing across TikTok, captions so brutal they felt surgical. It wasn't just a rumor anymore, it was entertainment. And for someone like Meghan, who had spent years carefully sculpting her public image into a story of empowerment, resilience, and royalty, it was a narrative shattering in real time. The phrase that set the fire? Yacht girl. 2 words. That's all it took to send her brand spiraling. Suddenly, old grainy photos resurfaced. Internet sleuths began digging. TikTok editors stitched together montages that turned her from duchess to cautionary tale in under 10 seconds. Headlines didn't need to say much. People were already watching, already laughing. Because when comedy hits the culture hard enough, it becomes truth. Not legal truth, not journalistic fact, but public perception. And perception is everything. The most devastating part? This wasn't a coordinated takedown. It wasn't a scandal timed with a Netflix drop or a palace announcement. It was organic, it was viral, and it was entirely beyond her control. Meghan's silence only fueled it. Her team scrambled, making calls, holding meetings, and engaging in frantic strategy sessions. But once the laughter starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. A scandal you can deny is one thing. A scandal people joke about? That's career poison. Because when the audience starts laughing at you, not with you, you don't get to control the story anymore. And that's what made this moment different. The punchline didn't just echo, it scorched. It rewrote how people saw her. And for Meghan Markle, the woman who built an empire on image control, this wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. But how did we get here? How did a struggling actress turn royal become the internet's favorite punchline? And what exactly is the yacht girl rumor that refuses to die? The story's darker than you think, and it's only just beginning. Long before Meghan Markle wore a tiara or stood beside a prince, there were whispers. They didn't start in the tabloids or the news, and they didn't roar in all at once. They slithered quietly through Hollywood cocktail parties, whispered behind raised glasses at Cannes, muttered across Instagram DMs between stylists, models, and assistants. They weren't headlines, they were warnings. She was beautiful, sure, elegant, charming, but the question lingered. How did someone with such a modest Hollywood resume manage to circulate so effortlessly in elite circles, while other actresses were pounding pavement, auditioning for toothpaste commercials or indie horror flicks? Meghan seemed to float. From yacht to gala, from private island to red carpet, she wasn't an A-lister, not even a B. At the time, Suits was her claim to fame, a niche cable drama barely making waves outside its loyal viewers. Yet somehow, she was being photographed in exclusive vacation spots and rubbing shoulders with people who typically didn't breathe the same air as cable TV regulars. It didn't add up. And in Hollywood, when success doesn't follow the usual path, people start connecting dots, whether the lines are real or not. That's where the yacht girl rumor began. The term itself sounds glamorous, even aspirational. Beautiful women on beautiful boats, champagne in hand, tan legs sprawled across teak decks. But those in the industry know it's code, a dangerous code. It implies access, but not the kind earned through merit. It suggests networking with a darker edge. And it's a label that's been whispered behind closed doors for decades. Applied to models, influencers, and yes, actresses. It's part rumor, part open secret, a handshake deal wrapped in glitter. And Meghan's name, somehow, always found its way into that conversation. There were stories, unconfirmed, undocumented, but persistent, that she had attended private parties on billionaires' yachts during the Cannes Film Festival, that she'd been spotted cozying up to European producers whose films never had auditions, but always had young women around, that a friend of a friend had once been invited to a yacht party and saw her there. No cameras, no evidence, just murmurs. At first, these whispers were harmless. In fact, to some, they were flattering. The idea that Meghan could work a room full of power brokers, that she had access to places most struggling actresses only dreamed of, it gave her a mystique, a sense of mystery. But mystery turns toxic when you step into the royal spotlight. Because once Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex, her past wasn't just background, it became ammunition. Every friend from her past, every relationship, every photo was suddenly a potential scandal. And those yacht whispers, they didn't stay whispers. They turned into online speculation, Reddit threads, YouTube conspiracy breakdowns, and TikTok theories. Anonymous accounts started posting alleged photos. Old images, grainy and out of context, were suddenly proof. Twitter threads connected names, dates, and parties as if it were a criminal investigation. And then came Kirby Sommers, an author with a sharp pen and a louder voice than most. She didn't just whisper what others had been saying for years. She printed it, out loud, without filters, without allegedly. And when she did, the rumors transformed. They weren't gossip anymore. They were claims, accusations, weapons. Suddenly, Meghan's carefully built image as a feminist icon, humanitarian, and royal revolutionary had a giant crack running through it. One that couldn't be fixed with a Vogue cover or a podcast appearance. Because here's the brutal truth. A rumor doesn't need to be proven to be damaging. It just needs to feel plausible. And when someone connects just enough dots, no matter how flimsy, the internet fills in the blanks with its own narrative. For Meghan, the story was spiraling out of control. She was no longer the author. And the next chapter, written not by him, but by viral voices and meme culture, would leave permanent damage. But what exactly is the yacht girl label? And why is it one of the most reputation-killing terms in all of Hollywood? The answer is darker than most people realize. And we're about to go there. To the casual observer, the term yacht girl might sound almost flattering, like a synonym for glamorous socialite or international it girl. Sun-kissed skin, designer sunglasses, draped in silk, lounging on the deck of a billionaire's yacht with the Mediterranean glittering behind her. But peel back the shimmer, and you'll find one of Hollywood's dirtiest open secrets. One that says far more than what it shows. Because beneath the filtered Instagram images and cocktail snapshots lies a truth that the industry knows well, but rarely says aloud. Yacht girl isn't just a label, it's a coded accusation. It whispers of beautiful women invited not because of their resumes, but because of their appearance. Of actresses and models flown to lavish destinations, introduced to wealthy men at private events under the guise of networking. But what's being traded isn't always talent. The label hints at blurred lines between socializing and escorting, between empowerment and exploitation, between personal choice and survival strategy in an industry that rewards connections more than credentials. And this is where Meghan Markle's story took a turn the palace spin doctors could never quite control. As she ascended from cable TV actress to royal consort, curious eyes turned backward. How had someone with no blockbuster roles, no breakout moment, and no major fashion house endorsement managed to climb so high so fast? Her time on Suits had made her familiar, sure, but not famous, not yacht-worthy famous. And yet, before the royal engagement, there were already murmurs that Meghan had been seen aboard private yachts at Cannes, that she was photographed in Monaco, Ibiza, Sardinia, always surrounded by elite company, always perfectly dressed for the part, yet strangely absent from the official guest lists. To critics, it didn't look like a coincidence. It looked like a pattern. And when Kirby Sommers, the writer known for spotlighting Hollywood's underbelly, bluntly claimed Meghan had participated in the so-called yachting circuit, it was like striking a match in a room filled with gasoline. The claim wasn't presented as speculation. It wasn't laced with soft language or coded in PR-friendly euphemisms. Sommers laid it out flat. Meghan, she alleged, hadn't just networked her way into privilege. She had yachted her way in. No sugarcoating, no qualifiers. And with that one assertion, the rumors mutated into something far more sinister. Suddenly, Meghan's luxury lifestyle, once admired as aspirational, was cast in a different light. Not earned, but arranged. Not the product of hustle, but of leverage. It was no longer about red carpets and royalty. It was about implication. Behind every designer dress and high-profile introduction lay a transaction, not a transformation. This wasn't just damaging, it was humiliating. Because Meghan had built her public identity on the idea of self-made success. The daughter of a Hollywood lighting director and a yoga teaching mother, she was marketed as the modern fairy tale, a biracial woman who broke royal barriers and rewrote history. Her platform was centered on empowerment, with her language carefully curated. Every interview, every podcast, every documentary focused on female independence, equality, and resilience. But the yacht girl allegations didn't just challenge her past, they torpedoed her brand. Because if Meghan had in fact gained access through yacht culture, as some claimed, it undermined everything she said she stood for. Feminism became performance, activism became a distraction, and the self-made became suspect. What made the blow even more brutal was how the internet processed it, not with outrage, but with laughter. The memes came fast, the edits are even faster. Meghan reimagined as Leonardo DiCaprio's yacht guest in The Wolf of Wall Street. Meghan photoshopped into Below Deck. Meghan in mock Disney trailers titled The Princess and the Yacht. It wasn't just a joke, it was a digital avalanche. And like all devastating scandals, This one didn't need confirmation. It just required believability. The real sting wasn't in whether it was true. It was possible that it could be true. And in the court of public opinion, that's often more damning than fact. Even the grainy images that resurfaced, blurry photos of a woman who resembled Meghan on luxurious vessels, didn't have to be authenticated. Their very existence was enough. People weren't sharing them to analyze. They were sharing them to mock, to snicker, to say, "See, we knew it." And once the internet decides that a narrative is funny, it sticks harder than any scandal. Because a lie you laugh at becomes harder to shake than one you fear. So what does it mean really to be called a yacht girl in Hollywood? It means that your accomplishments are suddenly reclassified as favors, that your friendships are now suspicious, that every door you ever walked through might have been opened by something other than talent. It's a character assassination that doesn't need a trial or a jury, just a rumor and a hashtag. For Meghan Markle, the implications were clear. Her fame, her fortune, her fairy tale, all of it could now be recast as a performance, and not the empowering kind, but the kind that made her look not like a survivor, but a strategist, not like a feminist, but a fabulist, not like a duchess, but a disguise. The question now wasn't whether the label was accurate, it was whether it had done enough damage to make accuracy irrelevant. And that's where Kirby Sommers returned, this time with no apologies, no filters, and no fear. Because when she said the quiet part out loud, Meghan's PR team didn't just panic, they went to war. If Meghan Markle had a do not name, do not invite list, Kirby Sommers would be printed in bold at the very top. She's not a royal correspondent, not a Hollywood gossip columnist, not a former friend with a grudge. She's far more dangerous than any of those. Kirby Sommers is a researcher, an author, and, perhaps most lethally, a woman unafraid to say what everyone else only dares to hint at. And when she spoke, the room didn't just go quiet, it caught fire. Kirby wasn't chasing clout. She wasn't chasing a spotlight. She had already built a platform by exposing the underbelly of the elite, writing extensively about sex trafficking, power structures, and the secret lives of the ultra-wealthy. She was no stranger to controversy, and even less a stranger to the powerful men and women who feared what she might publish next. She came with receipts, with patterns, with timelines. And when she dropped Meghan Markle's name into her growing dossier of high society corruption, it wasn't subtle. She didn't allege, she declared. Meghan wasn't just a product of Hollywood hustle, Sommers said. She was a graduate of a system, a transactional world where beauty, availability, and connections to the right yacht at the right time could change a life overnight. According to Kirby, Meghan didn't just float into elite circles. She was ferried in, escorted through, and the gateway, in Sommers' words, was the high seas. There was no fluff in her delivery, no emotional appeals, no hesitation. Sommers didn't frame it as gossip. She didn't frame it as speculation. She spoke with the cold, flat certainty of someone reading from a file. And that's what made it so devastating. Because when someone sounds less like a tabloid and more like a professor giving a lecture, people lean in. When someone says the quiet part out loud, not on a blog, but in a recorded interview, in plain, calm English, people listen. Sommers didn't need to scream. She whispered. She connected dots already floating in the atmosphere. Meghan's mysterious appearances at elite events before Suits made her a recognizable name. The supposed yacht circuit connections, the timeline of relationships that always seemed to align with upward mobility. And she said it plainly. Meghan was not just networking. She was navigating a world that traded access for visibility. And the boats were the bridges. Within hours, the internet erupted. It was the kind of scandal social media was built to devour. Anonymous Reddit threads sprang up overnight, cross-referencing flight records, old yacht party guest lists, paparazzi archives. TikTok creators made timelines, layering Sommers' voice over slideshows of grainy images and red carpet moments. The clips got millions of views. Twitter threads compiled her claims like a cold case file. People weren't just watching, they were investigating. And Meghan's team? They weren't prepared. PR firms know how to handle rumors. They can neutralize gossip with strategic leaks, soften headlines with puff pieces, and distract with feel-good philanthropy campaigns. But they don't know what to do when someone bypasses the tabloids and speaks directly to the public in a language colder, scarier, and more clinical than any gossip ever could. Sommers had changed the tone. This wasn't some anonymous YouTube video with grainy voiceovers and conspiracy music. This was a composed woman with credentials, articulating a narrative that pulled the thread on everything Meghan had built. She didn't shout, "Yacht girl," like an accusation. She diagnosed it as a condition. That subtlety made it worse, because when you remove hysteria from the scandal, what remains feels eerily plausible. And when Sommers laid out her version of Meghan's trajectory, it sounded less like an attack and more like a pattern, one that the internet, hungry for answers, was eager to believe. Even more dangerous, Summers didn't attack Meghan personally. She didn't talk about race, politics, or petty celebrity drama. She focused entirely on behavior, opportunity, and power. She framed Meghan as a player in a system, willing or not, and made the audience feel like they were finally being let in on the truth Hollywood refuses to admit. And that's the nightmare scenario for anyone in PR. Because how do you cancel someone who isn't dramatic? How do you silence someone who never yells? How do you spin a story that was never packaged as drama, but as documentation? Meghan's camp reportedly went into full crisis mode. Internally, the phrase Kirby Summers became radioactive. Her name was removed from Google Alerts. Researchers were tasked with combing through her interviews, looking for inconsistencies to exploit. Editors were quietly asked to steer away from covering her work. And yet, none of it worked because the damage was already viral. The power of Kirby's claims didn't come from shock value. They came from calm certainty. And once the public got a taste of that, the yacht girl narrative stopped being fringe. It became a cultural conversation. This wasn't just about Meghan anymore. It was about what her story symbolized. Women are climbing the ladder in an industry that offers more yachts than job interviews. The unspoken rules of access, the invisible hands that guide careers from obscurity to stardom, often with strings attached. Kirby Summers forced that conversation into the open, and Meghan Markle became the unfortunate centerpiece. It wasn't fair, but it was effective. And worse, Meghan had no winning move. Respond, and she validates the accusation. Stay silent, and the public sees it as guilt. But either way, Summers had already achieved what few critics ever could. She bypassed Meghan's fortress of PR and reached the one place that matters most: public perception. Because when the world starts to believe that your image is a mask, and someone peels it off slowly, calmly, and without blinking, no glossy magazine cover can put it back on. But just as the firestorm began to intensify, another voice entered the arena. This time, it wasn't a journalist, it wasn't an author, it was a comedian. And with one perfectly timed punchline, he turned a whisper into a global laugh track, and a rumor into a reputation-destroying spectacle. Before the world knew her as the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle was a masterclass in self-curation. Every step, every appearance, every carefully chosen word painted the picture of a woman climbing her way to the top, on her own terms. The daughter of a yoga instructor and a Hollywood lighting director, Meghan didn't come from power or privilege, but she moved like someone destined for both. That was the appeal. A biracial actress who'd overcome rejection, bias, and an unglamorous start in television to land a starring role in the ultimate real-life fairy tale. But that fairy tale had layers, and more costume changes than most people realized. At first, she was the underdog, the struggling actress who had to hustle for every audition, whose blog, The Tig, chronicled her love of food, fashion, and finding your inner power. She wrote like a woman in control of her own destiny. Worldly, witty, grounded, she was the kind of person who quoted Aristotle in the same sentence as avocado toast. It was aspirational, but accessible. Then came Suits, a steady job, a modest fan base, and an upgraded wardrobe. Suddenly, Meghan was being invited to fashion shows, boutique hotel launches, and UN events. Her Instagram transformed. Less girl next door, more lifestyle brand. Still grounded but glossy. Still friendly, but with friends whose last names belong to European banking dynasties. And just like that, the reinvention began. Each chapter in Meghan's life came with a new identity. After meeting Prince Harry, she leaned into humanitarianism. Gone were the low-cut red carpet looks and cheeky captions. In their place, speeches about gender equality, quiet visits to underserved communities, hand-holding photo ops in distressed jeans and crisp white shirts. The vibe was clear. This wasn't just a Hollywood starlet anymore. This was a woman of substance, a global voice. Then came the wedding. The transformation is complete. The image was now royalty redefined. A modern duchess, black Givenchy dresses, messy buns that launched 1,000 Pinterest boards. Meghan wasn't just married to a prince. She was the narrative. A biracial, divorced American who walked herself down the aisle at Windsor. She became the symbol of what the monarchy could be. Inclusive, progressive, rewritten, but public approval is a house of cards. And Meghan, knowingly or not, kept stacking hers higher and higher. When things inside the royal palace began to fracture, so did her identity. Suddenly, she wasn't the empowered duchess. She was the wronged woman. The palace was cold. The press was cruel. The family, toxic. Meghan became the victim of 1,000 aggressions, some micro, some macro. And she made sure we knew. Oprah interviews, docuseries, podcasts, carefully crafted monologues that told the story of a woman persecuted for simply existing. And people listened for a while. Because Meghan doesn't just weather public perception, she shapes it. Her Netflix series wasn't a documentary, it was a reframing. Her Archetypes podcast wasn't a brand extension, it was a reclamation. Every time the media turned on her, she shed one skin and revealed another. Smarter, shinier, more sympathetic. From blogger to royal, from royal to refugee, from refugee to feminist icon. Meghan's reinventions weren't just responses, they were strategies. Each one was a calculated move to maintain control, to stay adored, to never let the audience settle too long in one perception. But here's the catch. When you wear too many masks, people start to wonder who's underneath. The yacht girl rumors didn't just attack Meghan's past, they cracked the illusion. They didn't say she was a liar. They asked a far more dangerous question. Was any of this real? Had Meghan ever really been the things she said she was? The empowering voice? The bullied duchess? The humanitarian? Or were they roles? Well performed? Deeply branded, but ultimately scripted? That's what made Kirby Sommers' claims so devastating. Not because they proved anything, but because they felt like a missing puzzle piece. For critics, it explained the fast rise. For skeptics, it confirmed suspicions. For the public, it turned mystery into a narrative. The reinvention magic faded, and in its place, contradiction. How could a woman who spoke so passionately about female empowerment be connected, no matter how vaguely, to a world that commodifies women? How could someone preach about breaking the system if she might have benefited from it in silence? It wasn't about whether Meghan was a yacht girl. It was about whether people now believed she could have been. And belief, once fractured, doesn't come back easily. Then came the memes, the laughter, the nicknames. Each one chipped away at the brand she spent years building. Not because people proved her past, but because they stopped trusting her present. Even her most loyal supporters began to squirm. Defending Meghan meant explaining the reinventions, which meant justifying why the woman in the UN speech sounded so different from the one in the Oprah interview. Why the empowering Duchess now seemed to duck accountability. Why every time criticism hit, the persona changed. Her critics didn't need hard evidence. They only needed a pattern. And Meghan, whether intentionally or not, had created one. A cycle of rise, backlash, victimhood, and reinvention. It worked until it didn't. Because eventually, even the most compelling characters run out of rewrites. Eventually, the public asks, what's the truth beneath the performance? And right when that question hung in the air, unanswered, a comedian walked onto a late-night stage and gave the world a punchline that shattered the silence. Coming up next, Jon Stewart didn't need a headline. He didn't need photos. All he needed was timing. And in one brutal monologue, he didn't just expose Meghan. He turned her into a meme. It only took a few seconds. A smirk, a setup, a perfectly timed punchline. No dramatic pause, no raised eyebrow, no need to explain. Just a comedian at the peak of his craft, delivering a joke so sharp it cut through years of curated narratives and left Meghan Markle's public image in shreds. Jon Stewart didn't accuse. He didn't speculate. He didn't cite sources or wave documents in the air. He didn't have to. All he did was say what half the internet had already whispered, but with something far more dangerous than proof: humor. And once the laughter started, there was no stopping it. Because here's the brutal truth. A scandal can be denied, but a joke sticks. And this one, it didn't just land, it exploded. With a single punchline, Stewart dragged the yacht girl rumor out of the shadowy corners of Reddit threads and fringe YouTube channels and dropped it squarely into the mainstream. Suddenly, this wasn't some whispered accusation floating in conspiracy circles. It was late-night comedy, broadcast, shared, clipped, and memed across the globe. The kind of viral that can't be undone. The kind that no PR team, no carefully worded statement, no glossy Vogue cover can contain. It wasn't about whether Stewart believed the yacht girl rumors. He never claimed to. But by joking about them, by acknowledging their existence with the precise cadence that makes an audience gasp and laugh, he gave the speculation a kind of legitimacy far more powerful than a headline. He transformed it from gossip into entertainment. And that's what made it lethal. Because once people are laughing at you, they stop listening to you. The Duchess of Sussex, who had spent the better part of a decade turning herself into a brand, an icon of resilience, empowerment, and reinvention, was now the subject of punchlines, memes, TikToks set to circus music, Instagram reels pairing her royal speeches with yacht party clips. The phrase yacht girl didn't just trend, it defined her. That's what makes comedy so dangerous in the court of public opinion. It's not bound by evidence or fairness. It doesn't need citations or context. It just needs a rhythm, a turn of phrase, a wink. And if it lands, it rewrites everything. Meghan's defenders tried to push back. They called the joke misogynistic, unfair, and rooted in sexism. But it was too late. The story had already escaped the cage. The punchline wasn't being debated, it was being shared, reenacted, subtitled in 10 languages, and posted to reels with millions of views. Every reaction video, every edit, every meme carried the same cruel message: you're not a duchess anymore, you're a punchline. And that's something no royal training can prepare you for. Stewart didn't just drop a joke, he shifted the entire conversation. Before, the yacht girl allegations existed in a kind of speculative fog, unproven, uncomfortable, floating just beneath the surface. But once he laughed, the fog cleared. People didn't need facts anymore. They had their cultural shorthand, their double tap moment, their viral soundbite. And that's what PR teams fear more than anything. Because you can refute a headline, you can debunk a quote, but you can't unhear a laugh. What made the situation even more devastating was how precise Stewart's joke was. It wasn't bombastic. It didn't rely on cruelty. It was elegant, surgical, delivered like a scalpel to the core of Meghan's identity. He didn't paint her as evil. He didn't call her a liar. He simply planted a contradiction, a duchess by day, and something very different by night. The audience roared. And Meghan's team? They panicked. Because they knew what that laugh meant, it meant the joke had landed so perfectly that it no longer needed to be explained. People got it. Whether they believed the rumors or not, they believed the joke. And in modern media, that's often the same thing. Within hours, TikTok was ablaze. Editors clipped the moment and layered it over old yacht footage, red carpet shots, and interviews where Meghan spoke about female empowerment. The contrast was devastating, and that was the point. The meme format did what no exposé could. It made people feel the contradiction. Meanwhile, Twitter turned Stewart's punchline into a hashtag war. Just Yacht Girl trended beside the Stewart roast. The memes grew more brutal. Photoshops showed Meghan in Titanic stills, in the arms of Leonardo DiCaprio, champagne in hand. Satirical Disney trailers rebranded her as the princess and the yacht. It was relentless, it was ruthless, and it was impossible to ignore. For Meghan, this was more than embarrassing. It was crippling because her entire brand depended on narrative control. Carefully managed interviews, strategically placed op-eds, polished documentaries with sweeping string music and soft lighting. But comedy doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't follow your script. It flips the script. And once the internet laughs, it stops caring about the truth. What's worse, Stewart's joke offered a kind of permission. Suddenly, people who had been quietly skeptical of Meghan felt free to say what they'd been thinking. Executives, publicists, journalists, they didn't have to be the first to speak. Stewart had already broken the seal. Now, they could pile on with plausible deniability. Hey, I didn't say it. Jon Stewart did. That's how reputations collapse. Not with a scandal, but with a laugh. And Meghan? She found herself in the middle of a cultural storm she couldn't spin her way out of. Because you can't outmaneuver a meme. You can't outtalk a joke that already lives rent-free in millions of minds. This wasn't just a public relations crisis. It was a cultural killshot. And the damage wasn't over. Because what came next wasn't just laughter. It was abandonment. Meghan had been counting on one person to step in, defend her, shield her like he had so many times before. But when the firestorm hit, Prince Harry didn't say a word. If Jon Stewart's joke was the spark, meme culture was the wildfire. Within hours of his segment airing, the internet did what it always does. It devoured, distorted, and detonated. The Yacht Girl rumors didn't just resurface. They metastasized. They transformed from fringe speculation into pop culture canon. Not because they were proven, not because they were challenged, but because they were funny. And in 2025, funny travels faster than fact. What made this moment so devastating wasn't the accusation itself. It was the sheer velocity of it. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, they didn't pause to ask, is this true? They asked, how many likes can I get from this? Split-screen edits exploded across TikTok feeds, pairing Meghan's heartfelt feminist speeches with yacht photos, champagne clinks, and sardonic captions like, from suits to sails, and float your way to royalty. The memes weren't subtle, they were surgical. Meghan reimagined as Rose from Titanic, standing at the bow of a super yacht, wind in her hair, and Harry awkwardly photoshopped into the background holding binoculars. Mock movie posters emerged, the Duchess and the Deckhand, Yacht Club Confessions, and Scam Jam, the High Seas edition. They weren't just cruel, they were viral gold. Tens of millions of views, thousands of shares. Edits layered with sped-up audio and commentary from influencers who had never cared about royal drama suddenly found their videos exploding in reach. And that's the key. This wasn't about information, it was about entertainment. When Meghan Markle became a meme, she lost control of her narrative. It didn't matter what she had done or hadn't done. What mattered was that the audience had decided she was funny to laugh at, and worse, deserved to be laughed at. Her critics reveled in the chaos. Hashtags like Chas, Yacht Girl Duchess, Scamella Markle, and Ish, Decked Out Duchess trended for days. Her past appearances were mined for inconsistencies. Her Netflix docuseries was recut by TikTok editors into parody trailers. A scene where she tearfully describes palace racism, now set to ocean waves and yacht horns under the caption, "Cry me a Mediterranean." But the laughter didn't stop at strangers online. Within the entertainment industry, the one Meghan had long sought to dominate as a producer, speaker, and cultural voice, something even more corrosive was happening. Permission. Jon Stewart's joke gave permission for insiders to say what they'd always thought, that Meghan's rise felt calculated, that her brand was built too quickly, with too much polish and not enough substance, that the yacht girl rumor, true or not, fit a pattern that was too tempting to ignore. Producers, publicists, and even journalists began speaking in code. She's got yacht vibes, not another Meghan situation. Let's not get decked. The mockery became industry shorthand. Private Slack threads buzzed with parody emojis. In meetings, her name prompted chuckles, not respect. And her silence, it didn't help. In a different era, silence might have seemed dignified, strategic. But in this climate, it was interpreted as guilt. Every hour Meghan stayed quiet, the memes multiplied. Her silence wasn't power, it was fuel. Behind the scenes, her PR team was scrambling. Focus groups were held. Rebranding strategies were drafted. Influencers were approached for support posts, but nothing worked. Because when your name becomes a punchline, no amount of PR can erase the echo of laughter. Even her supporters were stunned into stillness. Those who had once championed her feminist activism and racial justice commentary were left without a script. How do you defend someone when the scandal isn't about policy or politics, but perception? How do you push back against a viral clip when pushing only amplifies it? And then came the receipts, or what looked like them. Old photos resurfaced, grainy shots from Cannes, a blurry image of Meghan on a yacht with high-profile men. None of it is definitive. All of it is compelling enough. Screenshots from obscure forums, an alleged guest list from a 2014 yacht party. Suddenly, everyone was an investigator. Threads broke down dates, locations, dress patterns, and facial features. The debate wasn't over the truth. It was over the narrative. And the narrative was brutal. Meghan wasn't being discussed as a royal, or an activist, or even an actress. She was being dissected as a phenomenon, a case study in social climbing, a meme before she could finish being a person. And perhaps the most devastating cut of all, she was alone in it. Because when the memes got too loud, Prince Harry, the one man who had once challenged the British press to protect her, said nothing. No official statement, no social media rebuttal, no awkward interview quote, just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. It said, "You're on your own." And in a world where perception is reality, that silence allowed the world to write its own version of events. One where Meghan Markle wasn't a self-made woman, or a visionary, or a victim. She was just a joke in someone else's punchline. But behind that silence was another crack forming. One even Meghan didn't expect. Because while she was drowning in mockery, the man who once promised to shield her from the world was nowhere to be found. And his silence wasn't just strange, it was deafening. For years, Prince Harry was Meghan's loudest protector. When tabloids came after her with invasive headlines and barely veiled racism, he roared. When palace aides leaked stories to the press, he issued statements. When the world questioned her character, he took on the war himself. Lawsuits, media takedowns, scathing documentaries. Harry had made one thing crystal clear: no one messes with his wife. And then the yacht girl storm hit. Rumors swirled. Memes erupted. Meghan's name became a trending punchline. Her reputation, already hanging by a thread after years of tabloid tug-of-war, began to disintegrate. But this time, Harry said nothing. Not a word, not a whisper, not even a vague Instagram quote about truth or love or standing together. Just silence. And in that silence, the public heard everything. Because when your brand is built on being the fierce husband, the protector, the man who would burn the system down for love, and then you go quiet in her darkest hour, people notice. And they ask questions. Was he distancing himself? Was he being advised to lie low? Or worse, was he losing faith in the very narrative they had crafted together? Insiders whispered that Harry was deeply uncomfortable with the resurfacing rumors. He felt trapped. Defending Meghan now might cause more damage than good, because defending her too strongly might validate the very thing he wanted to deny. And staying silent? Well, that wasn't looking much better either. For a man who once declared war on the press for publishing a single offensive headline, this silence felt like betrayal. Meghan reportedly wasn't just confused. She was furious. Sources close to the couple claimed she confronted him behind closed doors, accused him of failing her, demanded to know why the man who once stood before cameras and called out racism now couldn't muster the courage to shut down a joke. But Harry apparently had nothing useful to say, because he knew exactly what this moment meant. This wasn't a tabloid story they could sue. It wasn't a gossip piece they could spin. It was a joke. And jokes don't follow legal protocol. Jokes don't respect PR strategies. Jokes live forever. And worst of all, jokes are contagious. Every time Harry opened his mouth to defend Meghan, the internet only laughed harder. Screenshots, clips, reactions. Every attempt to protect her would instantly become more meme fuel, more late-night monologue material, more TikToks mocking his indignation too. So instead of fighting, Harry froze. And to Meghan, who had built her entire post-royal brand around the idea of being supported by a man brave enough to walk away from the crown, It was a shattering reversal. Suddenly, she wasn't just fighting the media or public perception, she was fighting alone. And Harry? He retreated into photo ops, staged charity visits, carefully orchestrated social media posts showing him smiling with puppies or shaking hands at sustainable agriculture events. Polished, harmless, safe. The very opposite of the man who once stood before a roaring crowd and said, "If you knew what I knew, you'd do what I did." But now he wasn't doing anything. The world noticed. So did Meghan's critics. And they loved it. "This is what happens when the script falls apart," one commentator wrote. Even Prince Harry doesn't want to recite it anymore. What made his silence more brutal was the timing. While Meghan was becoming the butt of a global joke, Kate Middleton, her royal rival, was receiving waves of public sympathy during her battle with cancer. William stood tall. The palace stood united. And Harry? He looked like a man caught between two collapsing identities. The renegade royal who ran from tradition, and the husband whose silence now echoed louder than any vow he ever made. The silence didn't just hurt Meghan, it hollowed her. Because her image was never just about her, it was about them. The couple who fled the crown, the duo who dared to challenge the firm, the modern love story that was supposed to rewrite royalty itself. And now, one half of that duo was nowhere to be found. Even Meghan's most devoted fans began asking, where is Harry? His absence felt strategic, calculated, cold. Not the reaction of a man protecting his wife, but of a man protecting himself. And in the savage logic of meme culture, that kind of silence isn't neutral. It's permission. Permission to laugh harder, to believe more, to take the joke further. Because if even he isn't speaking up, maybe there's nothing left to defend. For Meghan, the optics were catastrophic. Not just because the world was mocking her, but because the man who once fought the world for her now watched quietly from the sidelines. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't just a scandal, it was an unraveling, a narrative in freefall. And the damage wasn't stopping, it was accelerating. Because up next, Hollywood smelled blood. In the silent corridors of power, Hollywood boardrooms, private producer lunches, executive retreats in the hills, there's a rule everyone knows but no one says. Never mock the rising star. No matter how annoying the self-promotion, no matter how over-polished the branding, you smile, nod, and keep your opinions private. Because today's meme could be tomorrow's Oscar winner. And in Hollywood, reputations shift faster than box office numbers. But Meghan Markle? Her reputation didn't shift, it collapsed. And when it did, Hollywood did what it always does when blood hits the water. It laughed. Not publicly, of course. Not yet. But inside studio conference rooms, Meghan's name stopped prompting eye rolls and started prompting punchlines. Stewart's joke had changed everything. It didn't just mock Meghan, it unlocked something. It made it socially acceptable to say what many in the industry had whispered for years. This whole thing was always too good to be true. You could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from agents and producers who had been forced to pretend. Pretend that Meghan's post-royal influence matched her actual star power. Pretend that her Netflix series had real depth. Pretend that her brand partnerships weren't bloated with empty buzzwords. For years, they played along because the narrative demanded it. But now, Stewart had ripped the veil off, and everyone could laugh without guilt. You see, the Meghan thing became shorthand at talent agencies and coffee meetings, followed by Snickers, followed by stories. Stories about Meghan pitching scripted shows that didn't go anywhere, about meetings where her team pushed for seven-figure deals without the ratings to back them up, about awkward networking events where Meghan dropped names harder than she dropped dialogue. And perhaps most devastating of all, the silence from those who once courted her. Netflix had been the first to break the illusion, reducing her multi-million-dollar contract. Quietly shelving projects that once came with press releases and glowing praise, Spotify had already bailed. Their partnership with Meghan ended not with a bang, but with a single awkward quote. We expected more. More impact, more content, more results. Behind the scenes, executives who had once taken her calls were now politely declining. Meetings got pushed, emails went unanswered. Not because she'd committed some great crime, but because her value, her buzz, her bankability had flatlined. The Yacht Girl scandal didn't just hurt her image. It reframed her entire Hollywood journey. Every connection now looked suspicious. Every opportunity now felt like an arrangement. Did she earn her place, or did she maneuver into it? Once that question started circulating in elite circles, it never stopped. Publicists began warning their clients, be careful aligning too closely with Meghan right now. Brands got cold feet. Influencers stopped name-dropping her for clout. The fear wasn't that she was toxic, it was that she had become ridiculous. And in Hollywood, that's worse, because a scandal can be spun, but a laughingstock? That sticks. Even actresses who had once praised Meghan for breaking barriers now distanced themselves. Not because they believed the yacht rumors, but because they believed the pattern. The endless reinventions, the curated image, the overuse of victimhood, the sense that everything was a performance layered on top of another performance. And when Stewart distilled it all into a single punchline, Hollywood nodded. That's it. That's what we couldn't say before. Her critics didn't need evidence. They already had something more powerful: confirmation bias. Meghan had burned bridges. Old friends, staff, palace aides, even family members. Each person who had once been close, then mysteriously disappeared from her orbit, suddenly looked like another piece in the puzzle. Now the industry could ask, were they all the problem? Or was she? And then came the worst shift of all. Industry mockery turned into cultural shorthand. Writers' rooms began using "pulling a Meghan" as a punchline, meaning someone overplaying their hand, branding themselves before earning it, or victim spinning every setback. Casting directors referenced her with irony. This character's got Meghan energy, smiles, but it's all marketing. Her name no longer meant inspiration. It meant performance, projection, pretending, and in an industry obsessed with authenticity, the stench of artificiality is fatal. The irony is brutal. Meghan had spent years trying to be more than an actress, more than a duchess, more than a headline. She wanted to be a legacy, but Hollywood doesn't care about legacies. It cares about momentum. And Meghan's momentum was gone. The Stewart joke had been the catalyst, but Hollywood did the rest. Executives chuckled at her latest venture. Influencers stopped reposting her quotes. Even sympathetic media outlets began hedging their language, inserting phrases like "critics claim" or "some question her past." Just enough wiggle room to prepare for a full rebrand without her. For Meghan, it was the ultimate betrayal. Not just because they laughed, but because they had once pretended to believe. And now, that mask was gone too. Coming up next, with the entertainment world quietly shutting its doors and her public image in tatters, Meghan faced the one question no royal, no celebrity, no public figure ever wants to confront. What happens when the world stops buying what you're selling? Some scandals flare up and disappear. A headline, a tweet, a quick-fire controversy that dies down as the news cycle spins forward. But others, they linger. They fester. They sink into the bones of public perception until they're no longer just a rumor. They're a reputation. And Meghan Markle's Yacht Girl scandal didn't just survive the cycle, it outlasted it. Because this wasn't about one photo or one comment, it was about accumulation. Years of reinventions, contradictions, and narrative control, all collapsing under the weight of a single viral punchline. Jon Stewart didn't need to say much. The audience already knew the setup. All it took was a smirk and a few well-placed words, and suddenly the Duchess wasn't regal anymore. She was ridiculous. And in today's world, ridicule is worse than accusation. The scandal refused to fade because it wasn't just Meghan under fire. It was what she represented: social climbing, celebrity activism, image over substance. To critics, she became the ultimate symbol of performative empowerment. To skeptics, she was the proof that even royalty can be manufactured in a PR lab. She built her brand on the idea that she was different, that she had broken through impossible barriers, that she was the modern woman, feminist, humanitarian, bold, unbreakable. But the second the Yacht Girl label caught wind, all of that started to look like costume changes, carefully crafted, painstakingly rehearsed, less biography, more branding. And that's why the scandal won't die. Because even if the photos are fake, even if the rumors are exaggerated, the doubt is real, the contradiction is real. And in the public mind, perception beats proof every single time. It didn't help that her response was silence, or worse, confusion. No bold rebuttal, no elegant clapback, no Oprah sequel to reclaim her truth. Just a weird stillness as the internet reshaped her story, one meme at a time. Meghan, the woman who once controlled every headline, now watched as the narrative ran without her. She was no longer the author, just a character, a symbol, a joke. And the people around her, they weren't saving her either. Not Harry, who vanished into charity events and photo ops. Not Netflix or Spotify, which quietly distanced themselves. Not her A-list friends, who suddenly had nothing to say. The machine that had once helped build her image was now watching it burn, and doing nothing to stop it. Because in Hollywood, loyalty is optional, but distance is survival. The most damning part of all this, Meghan didn't have to be guilty for the damage to stick. That's the cruelty of modern scandal. It's not about what's true, it's about what's viral. And when a narrative hits the perfect mix of mystery, contradiction, and cultural symbolism, no PR team in the world can scrub it clean. The phrase Yacht Girl isn't just a rumor now. It's a tag, a stain, a shorthand used in comments, jokes, and late-night segments. It's burned into the algorithm, baked into the discourse. And every time Meghan tries to step forward, to release a new product, a new show, a new speech, it will be there, hanging in the background, waiting to be memed again. And that's the true danger. Because even if she moves on, even if the press calms down, the internet doesn't forget. The internet archives, it recycles, it remixes, and it resurrects. This wasn't just a PR disaster, it was a brand implosion, the kind of reputational wound that doesn't bleed. It scars. And no matter how many new causes she champions, or platforms she builds, or outfits she wears, there will always be that one joke, that one whisper, that one meme, the scandal that won't die. Because Meghan tried to rewrite the royal narrative, but in the end, the internet wrote hers.